you spent like 35 years at Utah State studying how animals and people learn what to eat. If a friend who'd never really thought about grazing or nutrition before asks you to explain what you actually do, how would you explain it in 1 to 2 sentences?
Yeah, very good question on that. I think there are really three facets in trying to think about the three things that we do. So I would say that there's a wisdom to the body, that our bodies have a wisdom to them. And when it comes to eating, that the body knows what it needs if it's allowed to have proper choices. That's the big picture of it, that there's this nutritional wisdom of the body. And then there are three facets that we really studied. One are these transgenerational linkages, what I refer to as transgenerational linkages. And that's simply that we begin to learn what's food and what's not food in the womb, literally. The flavors of foods that moms eats gets into the amniotic fluid. Fetal taste system's fully functional during the last trimester of gestation. So we're starting to learn before we're even born. All creatures are. And then after birth, flavors in mother's milk influence what creatures do. And then mother as a model, what mother's eating, what she's not eating. Those are things that we studied a lot, those linkages, how we become linked to the landscapes that we inhabit, for better or worse. Nowadays in the human population, it's a disaster, of course. The way our food preferences have been hijacked basically by the food industry. But in natural environments and natural systems, that's not the case. So there's these transgenerational linkages. That's one part. The second part is these feedbacks, and you mentioned your interest in the feedbacks. If you think why any creature eats, what's it feeding? I like to ask people that question and see what they come up with. But ultimately, it's cells and organ systems in the body, the trillions of cells that make up a body. And feedback is how cells and organ systems, including the microbiome, alter liking for the flavors of foods as a function of need.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what's happening. So that feedback changes our liking for the flavors of foods. And you can get into a lot of details of how that's mediated. If you look at where nerves that innervate the body go, they go here to the brain stem and they converge with nerves for taste. And those nerves transfer and relay through brain stem to the limbic system and the cortex. So there's the neural connections, there's feedbacks from peptides and hormones and a bunch of detail. But the idea is simply that cells and organ systems are able to alter our liking for the flavors of foods as a function of need. And that's nutritional wisdom manifest at the individual level, then day in, day out.
Yeah,
The
so you
third
actually, yeah,
the
and it,
third the third part, I'll just say briefly, is having a variety of nutritious foods available for the animals that we studied. And when they're foraging on diverse landscapes, there may be 50, 100, 200 different plant species. And those literally become nutrients and medicines. And we showed that animals learn to self-medicate as well. So that becomes the nutrition center and the pharmacy.
yeah. So you actually went a little bit into my second and third questions. I have plenty. You talked a little bit about the flavor feedback relationship. Can you talk me through what's actually happening when an animal or a person chooses what to eat? Is there anything that the body's doing that the brain really isn't aware of?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If I ask you what enzymes you're releasing right now to digest the breakfast that I guess you probably had here earlier this morning, or maybe didn't, you'd laugh and say, I'm not thinking about that at all. And it's the same thing with these feedbacks. They happen automatically. It's not something that we're sitting there thinking about changing our liking for the flavor of whatever it is we're eating. That's happening automatically. So it's what are referred to as affective processes. There's nothing cognitive that's going on there. But when we start to think too much about these things, when we're told you really shouldn't be eating that because that's bad for you, and you should be eating that because that's good for you, then the cognitive, rational, analytical part of our being can overwhelm this non-cognitive, intuitive, synthetic part of our being, and we get out of touch with the natural wisdom of the body. And I think that happens all the time for people nowadays. We're just overwhelmed. Why we shouldn't be eating with it. Who even knows about the wisdom of their own body and how to get in touch with that any day? It's not talked about or thought about.
Yeah, so industrial agriculture has done really the opposite of what your research suggests. It's uniform feeding, uniform animals, uniform output. What really gets lost? What is the main thing that gets lost when that variety is stripped out of how animals and how we eat?
Yeah, I think the clearly there the recognition of individuality. We studied that a lot, and what you come to realize is that no two creatures on this planet have ever been or ever will be alike. You have genes being expressed in ever-changing environments, plus nature adds a pinch of chance to that. So no two creatures are alike. And that individuality, when we formulate rations for the quote average individual, it's an illusion because there is no average individual. When you look at what individuals do when they're given choices, and this has been shown in human studies 100 years ago, no two individuals select the same combination of foods. No individual selects the same foods from day to day. They each select foods, though, that meet their needs at the individual level and across time. And that's really what gets lost is there is no average individual, no average creature. Every individual is unique. And diversity enables individuality, diversity of choices.
Yeah, so you've spent a long time, decades working with ranchers and farmers rather than just in labs. What did the people teach you that were working the land? What were they able to make you understand that academic literature wasn't quite able to?
I think one, just reflecting back, is that there's more than one way to learn. And the people that I was working with had the experience. They didn't necessarily even go to school at all. I'm thinking now of Henry DeLuca, the ranch I worked on for 7 years when I was in high school and college. I learned so much from Henry. He had no formal education, but what he had was a lifetime of experience working on landscapes with soil, water, plants, animals. And we used to talk about his practices. And when it came to livestock, we used to talk about what it means for an animal to know the range. And when I think about the work that we did over 40 some years, it all has to do with this notion of knowing the range. What does it mean to know the range? And the same thing could be said for a human being to know the environment socially and physically where you're born, raised, conceived, born, raised, and all that that implies regarding knowledge of what and what not to eat, where and where not to go, what's a predator, what's not a predator, every facet of life. And so we used to talk a lot about what does it mean for an animal to know the range, and then for people to do the same thing, to understand the environments where conceived, born, reared, and our linkages with this planet that ultimately nourishes and sustains us.
Yeah, so on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the most urgent, how worried should the average person really be about the disconnection between humans and the natural feedback systems that used to guide what we ate and why that particular number?
I don't want to sound like an alarmist. I'm not, but I'd say it's a scale on 5 now for me with what all that's happening ecologically, economically, socially across this country and the planet. I think trying to get back in touch with our relationship with one another and the landscapes that nurture and sustain us and think about what that really means is to me it's rates a 5 for certain.
Hmm.
We're to realize, I think, that we're members of nature's communities. We've so distanced ourselves from that we're members of nature's communities. What we do to them, ultimately, we do to ourselves. And I think only by declaring love, not war, on one another and the landscapes we inhabit, are we going to be able to continue to be on this planet as a species?
Yeah, so what's one specific thing that a regular person who isn't a rancher or a scientist can do that would actually start rebuilding our nutritional wisdom?
I think one of the things that strikes me is grow a garden. Just grow a garden. It gets you in touch with the soil, with plants. It gets you eating foods that are really nutritious. When you eat something that you've raised yourself, the flavors are usually incredible compared with what's in the store. We don't have big piece of ground here where we live now in Innis, Montana, about an acre and a half. We have gardens all over the place, and we like to share what we grow with people around us. And their reactions are amazing because, oh, I didn't know a carrot could taste that good. I didn't know a tomato could have that kind of flavor, and so on and so forth. So I think that's one thing I think that people can do is just take the time to, it doesn't have to be a big garden, but to get yourself back in touch with soil, plants, life,
Yeah.
nourishment. Yeah, nourishment and the great flavors that come from the foods that you grow yourself.
Yeah, so you've mentored like 75 or more graduates from a lot of different countries over your career. Is there one thing that you found yourself telling a large majority or almost all of them that you wish had been or you had discovered earlier?
Yeah, a good question. I don't know if there's one thing, but I think in those years, what we were able to do is create an environment that nurtured creativity. When I talk with people who went through the program back in the days, they say it was so creative, it was so out of the box, it was just so much fun. And I think it was the loving, nurturing relationships that we had for one another and just the not being bound by what was told in the past. This is until we started our work. Nutrition work was really biochemical and to a great degree, looking at nutrients and so forth and so on. The idea that animals learn, that there were feedbacks, that there's a nutritional wisdom to the body, that animals learn from mothers, start to learn in the womb. None of that was even thought about. And so it was the creativity that was so much fun. It was just a joy to be involved in all that work over the years. And I think that's what I thrived on and what all the students were thriving on as well. That environment that was created that was just it was just totally creative. That's what students tell me when we talk about that.
Yeah, so who are one or two scientists that you think I should interview after you?
One who's still active, quite active, and would really be able to relate to what we've talked about and build on it is Juan Villalba. He's at Utah State University, and I could give you his contact information. There's also he's still involved. He was very involved in the science, got his PhD at Utah State University. He's gone into his foot in kind of both camps of science and practice. And his name is Sheldon Atwood. He's up in Canada. And he might be an interesting one for you to interview too. He has quite interesting views on all of these topics.
Yeah, I have one more question for you, and I like to ask this question to every scientist. I get a whole host of different responses, and it's that if every teenager on Earth had to hear one final sentence from you, what would it be?
I would say to treat one another and the landscapes we inhabit, no matter who, with love and respect.
That's all I have for you. I really appreciate you coming to talk with me.